Hello, my name is Trace. I'm from the state of Kansas, within the United States. I would like to introduce to you this channel consisting of English with a subtitle.
How to Develop Self-Confidence and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Chapter 11. How to Interest Your Audience. This page you are reading now, this sheet of paper you are looking at, it is very ordinary, isn't it? You have seen countless thousands of such pages. It seems dull and insipid now, but if I tell you a strange fact about it, you are almost sure to be interested. Let us see. This page seems like solid matter as you look at it now, but in reality, it is more like a cobweb than a solid matter. The physicist knows it is composed of atoms, and how small is an atom? We learned in Chapter X that there are as many atoms in one drop of water as there are drops of water in the Mediterranean Sea. That there are as many atoms in one drop of water as there are blades of grass in all the world. And the atoms that make this paper are composed of what? Still smaller things called electrons and protons. These electrons are all rotating around the central proton of the atom as far from it, relatively speaking, as the moon is from the Earth. And they are swinging through their orbits, these electrons of this tiny universe, at the inconceivable speed of approximately 10,000 miles a second. So the electrons that compose this sheet of paper you are holding have moved since you began reading this very sentence, a distance equal to that which stretches between New York and Tokyo. And only 2 minutes ago you may have thought this piece of paper was still and dull and dead, but in reality, it is one of God's mysteries. It is a veritable cyclone of energy. The entirely new is not interesting. The entirely old has no attractiveness for us. We want to be told something new about the old. You cannot, for example, interest an Illinois farmer with a description of the Cathedral at Bourges or the Mona Lisa. They are too new to him. There is no tie-up to his old interests. But you can interest him by relating the fact that farmers in Holland till land below the level of the sea, and dig ditches to act as fences, and build bridges to serve as gates. Your Illinois farmer will listen open-mouthed while you tell him that Dutch farmers keep the cows during the winter under the same roof that houses the family. And sometimes the cows look out through lace curtains at driving snows. Here is another talk. As you read it, see if it interests you. If it does, do you know why? How sulfuric acid affects you. Most liquids are measured by the pint, quart, gallon, or barrel. We ordinarily speak of quarts of wine, gallons of milk, and barrels of molasses. When a new oil gusher is discovered, we speak of its output as so many barrels per day. There is one liquid, however, that is manufactured and consumed in such large quantities that the unit of measurement employed is the ton. This liquid is sulfuric acid. It touches you in your daily life in a score of ways. If it were not for sulfuric acid, your car would stop and you would go back to old Dobbin and the buggy, for it is used extensively in the refining of kerosene and gasoline. The electric lights that illuminate your office, that shine upon your dinner table, that show you the way to bed at night, would not be possible without it. When you get up in the morning and turn on the water for your bath, you use a nickel-plated faucet, which requires sulfuric acid in its manufacture. It was required also in the finishing of your enamel tub. The soap you use has possibly been made from greases or oils and have been treated with acid. Your towel has made its acquaintance before you made the acquaintance of your towel. The tanner used sulfuric acid in making the leather for your shoes, and it serves us again when we wish to polish them. You came down to breakfast. The cup and saucer, if they be other than plain white, could not have come into being without it. It is used to produce the gilt and the ornamental colorings. Your spoon, knife, and fork have seen a bath of sulfuric acid, if they be silver-plated. The wheat of which your bread rolls are made has possibly been grown by the use of phosphate fertilizer, whose manufacture rests upon this acid. If you have buckwheat cakes and syrup, your syrup needed it. And so on through the whole day. Its work affects you at every turn. Go where you will. You cannot escape its influence. We can neither go to war without it, nor live in peace without it. The three most interesting things in the world, what would you say they are? The three most interesting subjects in the world? Sex, property, and religion. By the first, we can create life. By the second, we maintain it. By the third, we hope to continue it in the world to come. But it is our sex, our property, our religion that interests us. Our interests swarm about our own egos. We are not interested in a talk on how to make wills in Peru, but we may be interested in a talk entitled, How to Make Our Wills. We are not interested, except perhaps out of curiosity, in the religion of the Hindu, but we are vitally interested in a religion that ensures us unending happiness in the world to come. When the late Northcliffe was asked what interests people, he answered with one word, and that word was themselves. Northcliffe ought to have known, for he was the wealthiest newspaper owner in Great Britain. How to be a good conversationalist. The reason so many people are poor conversationalists is that they talk about only the things that interest them. That may be deadly boring to others. Reverse the process, lead the other person into talking about his interests, his business, his golf score, his success, or, if it is a mother, her children. Do that and listen intently, and you will give pleasure. Consequently, you will be considered a good conversationalist, even though you have done very little of the talking. Mr. Harold Dwight of Philadelphia made an extraordinarily successful speech at a banquet, which marked the final session of public speaking course. He talked about each man in turn around the entire table, told how he had talked when the course started, and how he had improved, recalled the talks various members had made, the subjects they had discussed. He mimicked some of them, exaggerated their peculiarities, and everyone laughed, everyone pleased. With such material, he could not possibly have failed. It was absolutely ideal. No other topic under the blue dome of heaven would have so interested that group. Mr. Dwight knew how to handle human nature. An idea that won 2 million readers some years ago, the American magazine enjoyed an amazing growth. Its sudden leap in circulation became one of the sensations of the publishing world. The secret? The secret was the late John M. Seidel and his ideas. When I first met Seidel, he had charge of the interesting people department of that periodical. I had written a few articles for him, and one day he sat down and talked to me for a long time. People are selfish, he said. They're interested chiefly in themselves. They are not very much concerned about whether the government should own the railroads, but they do want to know how to get ahead, how to draw more salary, how to keep healthy. If I were editor of this magazine, he went on, I would tell them how to take care of their teeth, how to keep cool in summer, how to get a position, how to handle employees, how to buy homes, how to remember how to avoid grammatical errors, and so on. People are always interested in human stories, so I would have some rich man tell how he made $1 million in real estate. I would get prominent bankers and presidents of various corporations to tell the stories of how they battled their ways up from ranks to power and wealth. The kind of speech material that always holds attention. You may possibly bore people if you talk about things and ideas, but you can hardly fail to hold their attention when you talk about people. Tomorrow there will be millions of conversations floating over fences in the backyards of America, over tea tables and dinner tables, and what will be the predominating note in most of them? Personalities. He said this, Mrs. So-and-so did that. I saw her doing this, that, and the other. He is making a killing, and so on. I have addressed many gatherings of school children in the United States and Canada, and I soon learned by experience that in order to keep them interested, I had to tell them stories about people. As soon as I became general and dealt with abstract ideas, Johnny became restless and wiggled in his seat. Tommy made a face at someone. Billy threw something across the aisle. I once asked a group of American businessmen in Paris to talk on how to succeed. Most of them praised the homely virtues, preached at, lectured to, and bored their hearts. Incidentally, I recently heard one of the most prominent businessmen in America make this identical mistake in a radio talk on this identical topic. So do club women and traveling lecturers. So I halted this class and said something like this: "We don't want to be lectured to. No one enjoys that. Remember, you must be entertaining, or we will pay no attention whatever to what you are saying. Also, remember that one of the most interesting things in the world is sublimated, glorified gossip. So tell us the stories of the two persons you have known. Tell why one succeeded and why the other failed." We will gladly listen to that, remember it, and possibly profit by it. It will also, by the way, be far easier for you to deliver than are those wordy, abstract preachments. There was a certain member of that course who invariably found it difficult to interest either himself or his audience. This night, however, he seized the human story suggestion and told us of two of his classmates in college. One of them had been so frugal that he had bought shirts at the different stores in town and made charts showing which ones laundered best, wore longest, and gave the most service per dollar invested. His mind was always on pennies, yet when he was graduated, it was an engineering college. He had such a high opinion of his own importance that he was not willing to begin at the bottom and work his way up, as the other graduates were doing. Even when the third annual reunion of the class came, he was still making laundry charts of his shirts, while waiting for some extraordinarily good thing to come his way. It never came. A quarter of a century has passed since then, and this man, dissatisfied and soured on life, still holds a minor position. The speaker then contrasted with this failure the story of one of his classmates who had surpassed all expectations. Although he was ambitious to do big things later, he started as a draughtsman, but he was always on the lookout for opportunity. Plans were then being made for the Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo. He knew engineering talent would be needed there, so he resigned from his position in Philadelphia and moved to Buffalo. Through his agreeable personality, he soon won the friendship of a Buffalo man with considerable political influence. The two formed a partnership and engaged immediately in the contracting business. They did considerable work for the telephone company, and this man was finally taken over by that concern at a large salary. He became a multimillionaire, one of the principal owners of Western Union. We have recorded here only the bare outline of what the speaker told. He made his talk interesting and illuminating with a score of amusing and human details. He talked on and on. This man who could not ordinarily find material for a 3-minute speech, and he was surprised beyond words to learn when he stopped that he had held the floor on this occasion for half an hour. The speech had been so interesting that it seemed short to everyone. It was this student's first real triumph. Almost everyone can profit by this incident. The average speech would be far more appealing if it were rich and replete with human interest stories. If possible, these stories ought to tell of struggles, of things fought for and victories won. All of us are tremendously interested in fights and combats. As an illustration of this fact, read almost any novel, magazine, story, or go to see almost any film drama. When all the obstacles are removed and the reputed hero takes the so-called heroine in his arms, the audience begin reaching for their hats and coats. 5 minutes later, the sweeping women are gossiping over their broom handles. Almost all magazine fiction is based on this formula. Make the reader like the hero or heroine. Make him or her long for something intensely. Make that something seem possible to get. Show how the hero or heroine fights and gets it. the story of how a man battled in business or profession against discouraging odds and won is always inspiring, always interesting. A magazine editor once told me that the real, inside story of any person's life is entertaining. If one has struggled and fought, and who hasn't, his story, if correctly told, will appeal. There can be no doubt of that. Be concrete. The writer once had, in the same course in public speaking, a doctor of philosophy and a rough and ready fellow who had spent his youth 30 years ago in the British Navy. The polished scholar was a university professor. His classmate from the Seven Seas was the proprietor of a small side street moving van establishment. Strange to say, the moving van man's talks during the course would have held a popular audience far better than the talks of the college professor. Why? The college man spoke in beautiful English, with a demeanor of culture and refinement, and with logic and clearness, but his talks lacked one essential concreteness. They were too vague, too general. On the other hand, the van owner got right down to business immediately. He was definite. He was concrete. That quality, coupled with his virility and his fresh phraseology, made his talks very entertaining. I have cited this instance, not because it is typical either of college men or moving van proprietors, but because it illustrates the interest-getting power that accrues to the man regardless of formal education, who has the happy habit of being concrete and definite in his speaking. This principle is so important that we are going to use several illustrations to try to lodge it firmly in your mind. We hope you will never forget it, never neglect it. It is, for example, more interesting to state that Martin Luther, as a boy, was stubborn and intractable. Or is it better to say that he confessed that his teachers had flogged him as often as 15 times in a forenoon? Words like stubborn and intractable have very little attention value. But isn't it easy to listen to the flogging count? Picture building words. In this process of interest getting, there is one aid, one technique, that is of highest importance, yet it is all but ignored. The average speaker does not seem to be aware of its existence. He has probably never consciously thought about it at all. I refer to the process of using words that create pictures. The speaker who is easy to listen to is the one who sets images floating before your eyes. The one who employs foggy, commonplace, colorless symbols sets the audience to nodding. Pictures, pictures, pictures. They are as free as the air you breathe. Sprinkle them through your talks, your conversation, and you will be more entertaining, more influential. Did you ever pause to observe that the proverbs that are passed on from generation to generation are almost all visual sayings? A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Sly as a fox, dead as a doornail, flat as a pancake, hard as a rock. Lincoln continually talked in visual terminology. When he became annoyed with the long, complicated red tape reports that came to his desk in the White House, he objected to them, not with a colorless phraseology, but with a picture phrase that is almost impossible to forget. "When I send a man to buy a horse," said he, "I don't want to be told how many hairs the horse has in his tail. I wish only to know his points." Summary. 1. We are interested in extraordinary facts about ordinary things. 2. Our chief interest is ourselves. 3. The person who leads others to talk about themselves and their interests and listens intently will generally be considered a good conversationalist, even though he does very little talking. 4. Glorified gossip, stories of people, will almost always win and hold attention. The speaker ought to make only a few points and illustrate them with human interest stories. 5. Be concrete and definite. Do not merely say that Martin Luther was stubborn and intractable as a boy. Announce that fact. Then follow it with the assertion that his teachers flogged him as often as 15 times in a forenoon. That makes the general assertion clear, impressive, and interesting. 6. Sprinkle your talks with phrases that create pictures, with words that set images floating before your eyes. 7. If possible, use balanced sentences in contrasting ideas. The end.